Okay, so the next is IIFE. It is called IFE, immediately invoked function expressions. Okay, so the immediately invoked function expression in a JavaScript function that runs as soon as it is defined. It is called IFE. This is used to avoid the polluting the global namespaces. The syntax for immediately invoked function is the two brackets. The first bracket will take function and the second bracket will invoke that function. As we see here, we have written one immediately invoked function expression and we have declared couple of variables. So once this function expression executed, uh, these two variables get discarded. Okay, then the next is a curry or curry in JavaScript or currying function currying in a JavaScript. In a functional programming, transformation of a function of multiple arguments into several functions of a single argument in a sequence is called currying. Currying is a transformation of a functions that translate a function from callable as f, which takes the comma separated argument, into the callable as three functions which will take a single argument from that function. As we see here, suppose we have some function which takes a comma b and comma c, three comma separated arguments, and will return the sum of three variables. So by currying, we convert this function to callable function will take first argument, then the second function will take second argument, and the third function will take third argument. So as we see here, we have created some nested functions, so we can call it as a one by one. So as we see here, we have created this curried function which will take the function to execute, then we are returning a function which takes argument a, then inside that we are returning function which takes argument b, and inside that we are returning the function which takes the argument c, and inside of that will return the function which will passed in very first function, and will collect that argument and will pass to the function. So as we see here, we have created this curried sum variable, and will call the curried function and will pass the sum function which takes the three comma separated argument, and then we'll call this curried sum function and will pass the argument to this, will return one function, will pass the argument second for that function will also return one function and will take the last argument, and this function will return the actual sum function by passing these all three arguments to it. In this way we can create a currying in JavaScript. So in this way we make sure that we have all needed arguments before the actual execution. So the use case for the currying, suppose um, sometimes we need the uh, compose the sequence of the functions and ensures that the particular sequence is enforced to and the followed. Suppose we want to achieve this following process. First we need to check if the stock is existed, then if the stock is existed we'll check for warehouse, and then we'll deduct the stock of the item. As you see here, we have created this check stock function, will take the item id, then it will return the function which will take the warehouse id, it will return the function and which will take the actual quantity of the stock. So in this way we can achieve the queried functionality in the JavaScript. Okay, then the next is object constructor property. The constructor property of object returns a reference to the object's constructor function that created the instance object. For example, if we try to log the constructor of any string, it will give us the constructor function name, which is string. And suppose we created object a new person and we try to access the constructor, it will return us the constructor function of this object, which is person. So actually we have already used this constructor in the seventh step of the inheritance, as we seen already the 7 steps for using the prototypal inheritance in JavaScript. So next is a fundamental object constructor type. Object's constructor property always points to the fundamental object constructor type for object. For example, we have created number using the number constructor function. So the fundamental object constructor for the B is a number, which is the constructor function number. We have declared one object in a OB variable. So for the fundamental object constructor for OB variable is object. Next is debouncing and throttling. These are the mechanism implemented in JavaScript which are used to improve the performance of an application. So the debouncing, debounce a function makes sure that your code is only triggered once per user input, like search box suggestions and the text field autosaves. So let's say that we want to show suggestions for search query, but only after a visitor has finished typing in the text box. So for example, we have written the debounce function here. So we have declared a debounce function and we are passing the function to debounce for specific timeout. So we are taking the function and the timeout. We have declared then the timer and we are returning the function which will take the arguments. So we'll clear the timer first, and in a timer we'll check here if the timer is exist and we'll clear timeout. Then in a timer we will call the set timeout function and we'll pass the timeout for that function, and we will then in the set timeout function we will call function dot apply this and the argument. So in this way we will create a debouncing function. So in this way we wait for user to finish his inputs and then invoke a function once. It's like a child is asking for ice cream to his mom and mom says, I'll give you ice cream only if you stop asking. So the throttling is used to call a function after a particular interval of time. Only the first click is executed immediately. So we have created one throttling function here which executes after every 200 milliseconds, or we can pass the value for interval. So we have created this throttle function and we are taking one callback function to execute after some delay and the delay time in a millisecond. Declare one variable to should wait or not, which will be false first time. So in this way we will execute this function first time, and then we are returning one function from this throttle, and we are taking the arguments nearest parameter, and we'll check if should wait is true, will return, else we'll call the callback function by passing the arguments, and will then make the should wait to true, and after a delay of some time we'll make that should wait to the false. In this way we will keep calling this uh, CB function, which is the callback, in given interval of time if the user is continue to interact with the system. Then it's like a child keeps asking for chocolate and mom give him the chocolate in interval of some time. Okay, so the next is a callbacks. When we pass a function as an argument to a function, this type of argument is called as a callback function. For example, we have declared this function add and the function subtract, which will take a and b argument. Both the function will take 2 comma separated arguments, and we have then this calculate function which takes the add and subtract function. This is called as a callback function. So when we are passing this functions to the calculate function, this will become the callback functions for the calculate. So we use it like when the function has to wait for another function to complete, we use the callback function. We usually use to handle the asynchronous operations result, we use the callback functions. Okay, so the next is a set timeout. Set timeout function calls a function after a number of milliseconds. The set timeout function call the callback function only once. So as we see here, we have declared this set timeout function. We have passing the timeout in 500 millisecond, and the first argument as a function. We can write our code in this function, or we can just write a function to execute after this 500 millisecond. So as we see here, we have reference our set timeout in a timer variable. So to clear that timer variable or clear timeout, we use the clear timeout function, and we'll pass that ID of the set timeout. Okay, we have then the set interval. This set interval method calls a function after a specified interval. So this set interval is executed till we clear the interval using the clear interval, or the page is destroyed. So as we see here, we are using the syntax for the set interval. First is the function argument, and the second is interval time to execute this function in the given interval. So also we are referencing this set interval in this id variable, and we'll clear this interval using clear interval method, and we'll pass the id. So the set timeout will call only once, and the set interval will keep calling uh, till we clear that interval using the clear interval.